welcome to the latest episode of Millennial Money.
This week we're actually following on from last week's video. We're going to be talking about tips to improve your credit score. So Damien, give us 5-6 top tips on how to improve your credit score.
Okay, first one is get on the electoral roll. Even if you have no intention of voting, even though you should be voting, even if you have no intention of actually going to vote, it is a good way of...
An easy way
it's
as
an
well.
easy way, to be on it. And it's one of the things that can help your credit score. And of course, when you're going to be checked for credit, they want to see that you are on the electoral roll because it is a proof of address.
Okay, next tip.
It might seem obvious, but pay your debts on time. Now, the worst thing you can do is miss a credit card payment, and the easiest way to avoid that is to set up your money on direct debit. So you get a repayment on direct debit. And even if that repayment is to pay the minimum amount, just to make sure you don't miss it, then that's better than nothing. And of course, you can then overpay more than the minimum, which you should always try and do anyway during the month. So make sure you pay by direct debit, because if you miss a payment, it's one of the biggest things that will be a black mark on your credit history.
Okay, so what about tip number 3?
Tip number 3 is check your credit report. The previous video we did on credit, we talked about credit scores. We explained how to check your credit report. If you want to know more, go to moneytothemessage.com. And the reason you want to do that is you want to make sure everything is in order. It's like one of those things, if you're going to try and borrow money, you need to make sure there's nothing on your credit record that is an error, nothing to do with you. And it does happen. It's happened to me. Sometimes it can just be a mistake by a lender who's associated you with a particular address or something like that. Or it could be something that's fraudulent, where you've had people take money out in your name. So you need to make sure none of that exists before you go and borrow money. And of course, you need to also make sure there's none of those mistakes on there, because if there are, the lender won't know, your future lender won't know, and they'll hamper your credit score and your credit report. And they are easy enough to be rectified.
What about tip number 4?
Okay, tip number 4 is to manage your debt. Now, managing the debt, it doesn't matter that you have debt. You almost have to prove that you can use debt. So having no history of having any credit is going to actually hamper you in the long run if you wanted to try and get a mortgage. But by showing that you can manage debt, that if you have a limit, you're not maxed out to that limit. Normally it varies. When you look on the perceived wisdom about these things, it varies between 15 and 30% of your credit limit that you should try and stick within. So if you've got a 10 grand limit, try not to keep the amount you're actually using below 3 grand, because it means that you're using debt, you're managing debt, and you're repaying it. So think of it like the first time you were allowed out of your house by your parents. Then the first time you go, you don't want to stay out till 4 a.m. because if you do that, they're never going to let you out again. It's the same kind of thing in the credit world. So they want to see you actually managing it, being responsible before they unleash you with all that credit. So be sensible, be responsible, and if you do, then you've got a much better chance of getting a mortgage, which is the unleashing, because it's a huge debt.
Okay, what about tip number 5?
Right, tip number 5 is to pay more than the minimum. I touched upon it just a little bit earlier, but you need to pay more than the minimum because it does demonstrate your ability to manage your debt. But more importantly, when it comes to debt anyway, you want to overpay, because if you don't, it's going to take you forever to repay the debt. But overpaying, again, does demonstrate you're able to use credit, and it means it's better in the long run for your credit rating.
Okay, and then finally, tip number 6.
Tip number 6 is avoid those people like the plague who have bad debt. Now, I'm kind of being a little bit...
kind of unavoidable if that's your partner, or...
I'm being a bit tongue-in-cheek. But what you have to realise is if you become financially associated with somebody, then their bad credit can influence your credit report. So let's say you are a couple and your other half has a terrible credit history because he's been out spending loads of money, and as a result has racked up lots of debt he's defaulted on. If you get a joint bank account, then you will become financially associated, and it will start to impact your ability to get credit. So I would suggest that if there's somebody like that, you just keep your finances separate as much as possible, because as soon as you become linked, then it's going to start to hinder you. And I know plenty of couples who aren't even millennials, beyond age of millennials, who still keep their money separate for that reason, because of the one partner's past credit history.
Okay, so that's it for this week. We've had 6 financial tips on how to improve your credit score. Check us out on social media, our Facebook Money to the Masses, our Instagram at Money to the Masses, and our Twitter at Money to the Masses with the number 2. Thanks so much for watching, and see you all next week.